The wedding ring was still warm on my finger when my sister-in-law cornered me at my husband's memorial service. What she whispered in my ear that day would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family, my marriage, and the woman I believed myself to be. My name is Sarah, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. My husband Michael and I had been married for 18 years. We'd built something beautiful together, something I was proud of. Our townhouse in suburban Denver, our 2 kids Emma and Ryan, the family traditions we'd created. It all felt so solid, so permanent. Michael worked as an engineer at a tech startup downtown. He was the kind of man who never forgot our anniversary, who still left me little notes in my lunch bag, who coached Ryan's baseball team on weekends. I was a part-time graphic designer, mostly working from home, which gave me flexibility to be there for the kids. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We hosted barbecues every 4th of July, went camping in the Rockies each summer, and had this running joke about someday buying that cabin in Aspen we'd drive past on our weekend trips. Michael's sister Rachel was always part of our lives. 3 years younger than Michael, she'd never quite settled down the way we had. She bounced between jobs, between relationships, between apartments across the city. But she was family, and Michael adored her. So she was always at our dinner table, always invited to our celebrations, always there. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way Rachel's eyes would linger on our home during family gatherings, the comments about how lucky I was to have such stability, such security. At the time, I thought it was just sibling affection, maybe a little harmless envy. Then came that Tuesday in March. Michael collapsed at his desk. A brain aneurysm, the doctors said. No warning, no time to say goodbye. One moment I was texting him about dinner plans, the next I was standing in a hospital corridor, watching them pull a white sheet over his face. The weeks that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements, insurance paperwork, and trying to hold myself together for Emma and Ryan. Rachel stepped in immediately, and I was grateful. She handled the flowers, coordinated with the caterers, even helped me pick out the right outfit for the service. You shouldn't have to deal with all this, she kept saying, rubbing my shoulders while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at forms I couldn't focus on. Just let me take care of everything. The memorial service was held on a gray Saturday morning in April. The church was packed with Michael's colleagues, our neighbors, friends from the kids' schools. I sat in the front row, Emma and Ryan on either side of me, trying to be strong for them while my world crumbled around me. After the service, people gathered at our house. The living room filled with quiet conversations, the kitchen counter covered with casseroles and sympathy cards. I moved through it all like I was underwater, accepting hugs, nodding at condolences, feeling completely disconnected from my own life. That's when Rachel pulled me aside. She guided me into Michael's home office, closed the door, and turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. Sarah, she said, her voice steady and deliberate, we need to talk about what happens next. I stared at her, confused. What do you mean? I mean. She paused, glancing around the room at Michael's desk, his books, his engineering awards on the wall. You can't possibly think you can handle all this alone. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. Handle what? The house, the finances, the kids. She counted off on her fingers like she was listing problems I hadn't considered. Sarah, you've never had to make the big decisions. Michael took care of all that. And now. She let the sentence hang there, but I could hear what she wasn't saying. Now you're on your own, and you're not capable. I've been thinking, Rachel continued, moving closer, and I talked to Mom about it too. We think it might be best if you and the kids moved in with her for a while. Just until you get back on your feet. Move in with your mother? The words came out sharper than I intended. Just temporarily, Rachel said quickly, her voice taking on that soothing tone people use with children. You're grieving, you're overwhelmed. This house, all these memories, it's not healthy. And honestly, Sarah, can you even afford the mortgage on your part-time income? The question hit like a physical blow. Because I didn't know. Michael had always handled our finances, and in the chaos of the past few weeks, I hadn't even looked at our bank statements, our insurance policies, our mortgage balance. I need to figure that out, I stammered. Of course you do, Rachel said, and now her voice carried a note of pity that made my skin crawl. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. You shouldn't have to figure this out alone. Let me help you. Before I could respond, she was pulling papers from her purse. I've already talked to a real estate agent. With the market the way it is now, you could probably get a good price for this place. Enough to pay off the mortgage and have something left over for a fresh start. I stared at the documents in her hands. Listing agreements, market analysis reports, contact information for movers. She'd planned this. While I was picking out flowers for my husband's funeral, she was planning to sell my home. Rachel, I can't think about this right now. I know, she said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. That's why I'm here. You don't have to think about it. I can handle everything. The real estate process, sorting through Michael's things, even helping you find a nice apartment once you're ready to be on your own again. The way she said "on your own again" made it sound like I was a college student who'd temporarily moved back home. Not a grown woman who'd just lost her husband of 18 years. I need some air, I said, pulling away from her. Of course, Rachel said, but her eyes stayed on me as I headed for the door. Just think about what I said, okay? I only want what's best for you and the kids. I walked outside into our backyard, past the swing set Michael had built for Emma and Ryan when they were little, past the garden where we'd planted vegetables every spring. Everything looked the same, but it felt different now. Smaller somehow, less mine. As I stood there, I could hear voices from inside the house. Rachel was talking to someone, her voice carrying through the open kitchen window. She's not handling this well at all, Rachel was saying. I'm really worried about her. She can't even focus long enough to sign the insurance forms. Poor thing, came another voice. Michael's colleague from work, I think. It's good she has you to help her through this. Someone has to, Rachel replied, and I could hear the performative exhaustion in her voice. I mean, she's never had to handle anything like this before. Michael protected her from all the complicated stuff. Protected me. Like I was a child who needed to be sheltered from the realities of adult life. I wanted to march back inside, to defend myself, to tell them that I'd run my own design business, that I'd managed our household budget, that I wasn't some helpless ornament Michael had kept on a shelf. But the words wouldn't come. Because maybe they were right. Maybe I had let Michael handle too much. Maybe I was in over my head. That night, after everyone had gone home and the kids were in bed, I sat alone in our bedroom. Michael's side of the bed still smelled like his cologne. His glasses were still on the nightstand, next to the book he'd been reading about the history of the Denver Broncos. I pulled out my laptop and, for the first time since his passing, logged into our online banking. What I saw made my breath catch. Our checking account had barely enough to cover the next mortgage payment. Our savings account, which I thought had at least $10,000, showed a balance of $347. Where had the money gone? I clicked through months of statements, seeing automatic transfers I didn't recognize, payments to accounts I'd never heard of, withdrawals that made no sense. Then I found it. A life insurance policy I didn't know existed. A policy worth $200,000, with Rachel listed as the beneficiary. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the documents. The policy had been purchased 18 months ago, right around the time Rachel had started spending more time at our house, right around the time she'd begun asking more questions about our finances. I called the insurance company the next morning. The representative was kind but firm. The policy was legitimate, properly executed, and the beneficiary designation was clear. Rachel would receive the full payout within 30 days. But I'm his wife, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I understand, ma'am, and I'm very sorry for your loss. But the policyholder has the right to designate any beneficiary they choose. After I hung up, I sat in Michael's office, staring at his computer screen. I'd never gone through his personal files before. It felt like a violation, even now. But I needed to understand what had happened to our life, our security, our future. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Email chains between Michael and Rachel, going back over a year. Messages about his concerns about our marriage, about his worry that I wasn't capable of handling things if something happened to him. But the emails from Rachel, they were different. Sympathetic, supportive, gradually encouraging him to make practical decisions about protecting his family. You know Sarah better than anyone, one of her messages read. She's wonderful, but she's never had to be truly independent. If something happened to you, wouldn't it be better if someone who really understands finances was in a position to help her? Another message, sent just 3 months ago, I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe you're right that the life insurance should go to someone who can make sure it's used responsibly. Sarah's so emotional about money matters. Emotional. Like having feelings about financial security was a character flaw. The final email was dated just 2 weeks before Michael's death. I think you're making the right choice, Mike. This way, if anything happens, I can make sure Sarah and the kids are taken care of properly. You know I love them like my own family. I printed every email, every document, every bank statement. Then I locked them in a folder and put it in our bedroom safe. Because I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about money. This was about something much more deliberate, much more calculated. Rachel had systematically convinced my husband that I couldn't be trusted with our own financial future. And now, with him gone, she was positioning herself as my savior while holding all the cards. The next few weeks passed in a strange, surreal rhythm. Rachel continued to visit daily, always with new suggestions, new plans for my future. She'd brought over more real estate listings, information about apartments in more manageable neighborhoods, even brochures for support groups for widows starting over. I know this is hard, she'd say, settling into Michael's favorite chair like she belonged there, but you're going to be okay. We'll make sure of that. Meanwhile, I was quietly doing my own research. I met with our family lawyer, our accountant, even contacted a private investigator. What I learned made my blood run cold. The life insurance policy wasn't the only change Michael had made. He'd also modified our joint bank accounts, adding Rachel as a secondary holder in case of emergency. He'd updated his retirement beneficiaries, putting Rachel in charge of managing the funds for Sarah's benefit. He'd even given her power of attorney for medical decisions, supposedly because he worried I'd be too emotional to make rational choices. Every legal document that mattered now had Rachel's name on it. She hadn't just inherited money from my husband's death. She'd inherited control over my entire life. But the most devastating discovery came when I finally worked up the courage to call Michael's doctor. I needed to understand how this could have happened so suddenly, without any warning signs. Mrs. Martinez, the doctor said carefully, I'm not sure what you mean. Michael had been having headaches for months. He came in several times for tests. We discussed the risks, the warning signs to watch for. Headaches? I felt the room spinning around me. He never told me he was having headaches. He said you were dealing with some family stress, that he didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. Family stress. I thought back to those final months. What family stress? Our kids were doing well in school. Our marriage was solid. The only source of tension I could remember was Rachel. Rachel's increasing presence in our lives, her constant need for help with her latest crisis, her suggestions that Michael wasn't appreciated enough at home. Had she convinced him I was too fragile to handle the truth about his health? Had she positioned herself as his confidant while pushing me into the background of my own marriage? That evening, I confronted her. She was in our kitchen, organizing the sympathy meals in our refrigerator like she lived there. "We need to talk," I said, setting the insurance documents on the counter between us. Rachel glanced at the papers and her expression didn't change. No surprise, no guilt, no defensiveness. Just a calm, measured look that told me everything I needed to know. "I see you've been going through Michael's files," she said. "He left you everything." "He left me the responsibility of taking care of his family," she corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I stepped closer, feeling something hard and angry forming in my chest. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you convinced my husband that I couldn't be trusted with my own life." Rachel sighed, like she was dealing with a particularly difficult child. "Sarah, I know you're hurt. I know this feels overwhelming. But Michael was worried about you. He saw how you struggled with decisions, how you always needed his approval for everything." "That's not true. Isn't it?" She opened one of our kitchen drawers and pulled out a stack of mail. Bills, mostly, that had been piling up since Michael's death. "When's the last time you paid a bill? When's the last time you made a decision about anything important without asking Michael first?" I stared at the unopened envelopes, feeling shame burn hot in my chest. She was right. I had let Michael handle most of our administrative life. But that was partnership, wasn't it? Division of labor? "He loved you," Rachel continued, her voice softer now. "But love doesn't always prepare someone for reality. He wanted to make sure you'd be okay, that you'd have someone looking out for you. Someone like you." "Someone like me," she agreed. "Sarah, I'm not the villain here. I'm trying to help you transition into a life you can actually manage." The word manage hit me like a slap. Like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person grieving the loss of her husband. "What if I don't want to transition?" I asked. "What if I want to stay in my home, raise my kids, figure out my own life?" Rachel's expression hardened just slightly. "With what money? With what experience? Sarah, you can barely handle grocery shopping without a detailed list. How are you going to handle mortgage payments, insurance claims, college applications for the kids?" Each question felt like a small defeat. Because I didn't have good answers. Because I had allowed myself to become dependent in ways I was only now beginning to understand. "I can learn," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "Of course you can," Rachel said, and now her tone was pure condescension. "But why put yourself through that stress when you don't have to? I've already arranged for the real estate agent to come by tomorrow. We can have this place on the market by the weekend." "No." The word came out louder than I intended. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "No?" I said no. "This is my home. These are my children. This is my life, and I'm not handing it over to you just because you convinced my husband I'm incompetent." For just a moment, Rachel's mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating flash across her face before she caught herself and smiled. "Okay," she said calmly. "I understand you need time to process this. But Sarah, the insurance money comes to me regardless. The account access remains in my name. The power of attorney documents don't change just because you're upset." She picked up her purse and headed for the door. "I'll give you a few days to think it over. But sweetie, you're going to need my help whether you want it or not. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone." After she left, I locked the door and slumped against it. Emma and Ryan were upstairs doing homework, completely unaware that their entire future was being decided by someone who saw them as obstacles to be managed. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at Michael's desk and began making my own plans. Because Rachel had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed that 18 years of partnership had made me weak, when in reality, it had made me strong in ways she couldn't see. I might not have handled our finances alone, but I'd built a business from nothing. I might not have paid bills independently, but I'd managed complex client projects, deadlines, creative solutions under pressure. And most importantly, I knew something Rachel didn't. Michael might have been worried about my practical skills, but he'd never doubted my intelligence, my determination, or my ability to protect our children. It was time to prove him right, and prove her wrong. I started with the simplest thing I could control. My appearance. I know that sounds shallow, but for weeks I'd been shuffling around in Michael's old sweaters and yoga pants, looking exactly like the helpless widow Rachel wanted everyone to see. The next morning, I showered, put on actual clothes, and did my hair for the first time since the funeral. When Emma came down for breakfast, she stopped in the doorway and smiled. "You look like Mom again," she said. That simple comment gave me more strength than any pep talk ever could. I was still their mother. I was still myself. I'd just forgotten for a while. Next, I called my old clients. Before the kids were born, I'd run a successful graphic design business. I'd given it up to focus on family, but my skills hadn't disappeared. Within a week, I had 3 new projects lined up and a steady income stream started. Then I tackled the finances. It was overwhelming at first, but it wasn't impossible. I organized every statement, every bill, every account. I created spreadsheets, payment schedules, budget projections. It took me late into the night for several days, but slowly, I began to see the full picture of our financial situation. We weren't as secure as I'd thought, but we weren't helpless either. The mortgage was manageable if I was careful. The kids' college funds were intact. Michael's retirement account, while controlled by Rachel, was legally required to provide for me according to specific guidelines. Most importantly, I discovered something Rachel hadn't mentioned. Michael's employer provided a life insurance policy for all employees. A policy worth $50,000, with me listed as the sole beneficiary. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to give me breathing room, time to rebuild. When Rachel showed up the following Tuesday with the real estate agent in tow, I was ready for her. "Sarah," she said, her voice bright and artificial, "this is Janet Morrison. She's going to help us get this place ready for market." "Actually," I said, not moving from the doorway, "I won't be needing her services." Rachel's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not selling my house." The real estate agent looked between us awkwardly. "Perhaps I should come back another time?" "That would be best," I said. "Rachel, we need to talk. Privately." After Janet left, Rachel turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. The fake concern was gone, replaced by something sharp and impatient. "Sarah, we discussed this. You can't afford to keep this place." "Actually, I can." I handed her a folder with my financial projections, my client contracts, my budget plans. "I've done the math. I've secured income. I've organized our accounts. I'm staying." Rachel flipped through the documents, her jaw tightening with each page. "This is ridiculous. You're setting yourself up for failure." "Maybe. But it's my failure to make." "And what about the kids? What about their stability?" "Their stability comes from staying in their home, in their schools, with their friends. Not from being uprooted because you've decided I'm incompetent." Rachel slammed the folder shut. "Fine. Keep the house. But you're still going to need the insurance money, and that comes through me. You're still going to need help with major decisions, and Michael trusted me with that responsibility." "About that," I said, reaching for another folder. "I've been in touch with Michael's doctor." I watched her face change as I continued. "He told me about the headaches. The months of symptoms Michael never mentioned to me. The medical consultations he kept secret." Rachel's expression was unreadable. "Michael didn't want to worry you. Or someone convinced him I couldn't handle the truth. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation." I opened the second folder, revealing printouts of the email chains I'd discovered. I found your correspondence with my husband. Very interesting reading. For the first time since I'd known her, Rachel looked genuinely uncomfortable. Michael was concerned about your ability to cope with stress. I was supporting him through a difficult time. You were isolating him from his wife. I was helping him make responsible decisions for his family's future. You were positioning yourself to control that future. We stared at each other across the kitchen table. Two women who'd known each other for years, who'd shared family dinners and holiday celebrations, now facing each other as adversaries. What do you want? Rachel asked finally. I want you to transfer the power of attorney back to me. I want you to sign documents giving me control over my husband's retirement accounts. And I want you to stay out of my family's daily life. Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. And if I refuse? Then I go to the police with evidence that you systematically manipulated a sick man into changing his legal documents. I go to a lawyer about undue influence. I go public with this story. You won't do that. Try me. Something in my voice must have convinced her, because her whole demeanor shifted. The pretense of concern disappeared entirely, replaced by cold calculation. Fine, she said. I'll transfer the power of attorney. I'll give you access to the retirement accounts. But Sarah, the life insurance money is mine legally. There's nothing you can do about that. Keep it, I said, and the surprise on her face was worth everything. I don't want money that came from manipulating my husband. I'll make my own way. Rachel gathered her things and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. You think you've won something here, she said. But you have no idea how hard this is going to be. In 6 months, when you're struggling to make ends meet, when the kids are suffering because you can't provide for them properly, don't come crawling back to me. I won't, I promised. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen. The house felt different now. Lighter somehow. For the first time since Michael's death, it felt like home again. The next few months weren't easy. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if Rachel had been right, if I was in over my head. There were bills that came in higher than expected, client projects that fell through, moments when I questioned every decision I'd made. But there were victories too. Emma made honor roll. Ryan scored his first goal in soccer. My design business began to grow beyond what I'd ever imagined. Slowly, steadily, we found our rhythm as a family of 3. The biggest surprise came 4 months later. I was going through some of Michael's old papers when I found a sealed envelope tucked inside his favorite book. My name was written on the front in his handwriting. Inside was a letter, dated just 1 week before his death. My dear Sarah, it began, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true, and I'm no longer with you. I need you to know that in these final days, I've realized I made some terrible mistakes. The letter went on to explain everything. How Rachel had gradually convinced him I needed protection from life's complexities. How she'd offered to help manage things temporarily if something happened to him. How he'd begun to see her influence only at the very end, but felt trapped by the legal documents he'd already signed. I tried to change things back, he wrote, but my lawyer said it would take weeks to process new paperwork. I was running out of time, and I was scared. Scared of leaving you unprepared, scared of admitting how badly I'd misjudged the situation. The final paragraph brought tears to my eyes. You are the strongest person I know, Sarah. You built a life with me, raised our children, created beauty and meaning in everything you touched. If you're reading this, it means you've already proven that my final doubts about your strength were the biggest mistake of my life. I love you. Trust yourself. You've got this. Tucked behind the letter was one more document. A handwritten will, properly witnessed and notarized, leaving everything to me and the children. It wasn't legally binding since it came after the official documents, but it was proof of Michael's final intentions. I never used it. I didn't need to. By then, I'd already proven to myself that I could build a life without anyone's permission or approval. 6 months later, Rachel called. Her voice was different now, smaller somehow. "Sarah," she said, "I wanted you to know. I'm moving to Phoenix. New job opportunity." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "I hope it works out for you." There was a long pause. I also wanted to say, "I'm sorry for how things went after Michael died. I thought I was helping." "I know you did. Are you doing okay? The kids?" I looked around our kitchen. Emma was at the counter doing calculus homework. Ryan was telling me about his upcoming baseball tryouts. Dinner was in the oven, a new client project was spread across the table, and everything felt wonderfully, chaotically, perfectly normal. "We're doing great," I said, and for the first time in months, it was completely true. After I hung up, I realized something. I'd started this story talking about the perfect life I thought I'd lost. But maybe that life had never been as perfect as I'd believed. Maybe it had been built on the assumption that I needed protection from my own existence. The life I have now is messier, more uncertain, sometimes overwhelming. But it's mine. Every decision, every mistake, every small victory belongs to me and my children. And that feeling of ownership, of agency, of being fully present in my own story, that's worth more than any insurance policy ever could be. I still miss Michael every day. But I'm no longer mourning the woman I was when he was alive. That woman was real, she was loved, but she was only part of who I could be. The woman I am now is someone I'm still getting to know. And I like her more every day. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if someone has ever made you question your own strength, remember this. You are more capable than the people who benefit from your doubt want you to believe. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. Thanks for listening to my story, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life experiences that remind us all of our hidden strength.